Welcome back. This is video number 9, the book of Ruth. We're beginning today in Ruth chapter 2, verse 15. Um, we have an incident here in which Ruth and has sat down with the workers to have the lunch meal. Notice here that it says in verse 14 that when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She did not sit down with them. The King James says that she sat down beside them. Okay, so that she could not be, she would not distract any of them. Okay, she didn't sit in front of them so that they could all look at her. She didn't sit behind them so that they could turn around and look at her. She sat beside them. Now, we don't know exactly the seating arrangement there, but verse 14 also tells us that he gave her some roasted grain and she saved that, what was left over. She ate her fill and then she saved what was left over. And that reminds us of the New Testament when Jesus fed the 5,000 with the fishes and the loaves. It said that he blessed the food and he gave it to the disciples to give out to all of the people. And there were 12 basketfuls left over. And Jesus specifically said to gather it all up. Don't let it go to waste. Don't just let it, don't throw it on the ground out here. Don't let it go to waste. You can take it and give it to the poor. You can, and yes, I know people were poor, what we would think were poor, which would probably be more like middle class Americans. But there were people that sat around at the temple and sat on the street corners and sat throughout the cities that they were poor. They had nothing. There were beggars. There were people in the leper colonies that had nothing. And Jesus said, pick up the leftovers. And so here she's got the leftovers and she's going to take them home to Naomi because Naomi has nothing to eat or drink. I probably had some water, but I'm talking about she didn't have anything for a meal. Okay, verse 15, as she got up to glean, so after lunch now she doesn't just sit around with the rest of the guys and talk and joke with them and things like this. She gets up and gets back after her task. Well, what's her task? Her task is to take care of Naomi. Naomi's her mother-in-law. Naomi is her mother because she has now left her mother and dad in Moab, and Naomi is her mother. She has left Moab. She has come to Israel. Naomi is her focus. She's going to take care of her, so she's got to get up and get food for the family. But Boaz gives orders to his men. Now, these are the workers, to his men. Even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather, pull out some of the stalks for her from the bundles and leave them to pick them up, for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. And so, as I explained in the last video, the men would go along and they would grab a handful of grain, and with a sickle they would come along and cut it. Okay, now we don't know if they had big sickles like we see the old Western movies where they had big sickles with a blade on it about 18 to 2 feet long. We don't know what they had, if they had a hand sickle or if they had a big scythe. But the women then would come along and gather this grain these stalks that have been cut off, gather them up into bundles. And let's just say it's like today's wheat, and they cut them off close to the ground, and so you're going to have uh, the barley or the wheat's going to be about 18 inches to 24 inches long, something like that, to 2 feet. They're going to bundle them up into bundles so they can take it to the threshing floor. Now, it hasn't started separating from the kernels of barley, the kernels of wheat has not started separating from the head. So the head holds on to it pretty good. And he says, pull out some of that and pull out some of the stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gotten, and it amounted to about an ephah. Now, what she did was she took the heads off the stalk, put the stalk over here, put the head in a basket. So, because she didn't have a threshing floor to go to, she just had she's by herself. The stalks would be, she might have quite a bit of stalks, but she's going to get that grain out as much as she can. Okay, and she puts it in a sack, and it amounts to about an ephah. Now, an ephah is 2/3 of a bushel, roughly. Let me see if I've got that on a note somewhere. It's not just a little bit of grain. It's enough for the two of them to have approximately 5 days of food for both Ruth and Naomi. Not just 1 day, but 5 days. Okay, and so she's out there. She's worked all day long. She's got this grain. She takes it back home. She's headed back home. And after she threshed the barley, she gathered it, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town to her mother-in-law, saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over when she had eaten enough. So not only did she bring this sack of food, now this sack of grain's not ready to eat yet. Okay, and Naomi hasn't eaten all day long. So what she's doing is she takes whatever was left over at lunch, remember? Whatever was left over, she kept it. And let's just say she tied it up in the corner of her scarf or corner of her robe or something. And it might have been, a cupful. We don't know, but it was enough for Naomi to eat. And so she brought out what she had left over for Naomi. The barley, you have to winnow it. You have to get all of the trash out of it. You have to get all of the little pieces of no good stuff out of it. You got to get down to the kernel. Then you got to take that and you got to smash it in a mortar or a mill of some kind, or maybe it's a rock mill that they had where they put it in there and they take another rock and roll it across it and make flour out of it and mix it with some type of oil or water or something just so they could eat that. Okay? And so it's dark in the evening, and so Ruth comes home, and she brings not just what she's gleaned today, but she's also bringing in what she has uh, has left over from her lunch with Boaz and the harvesters. She's got it all tied up. She gives it to Naomi so that Naomi can have something to eat. And so verse 19, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." And so now we start with the 20 questions. You know, in the business that I'm in, sometimes I have to ask lots of questions. I'm used to asking questions of people. I used to get really upset when my mother and dad would ask me questions when I was younger. Even when I got older, what you been doing today? What you do? You know, have you been fishing lately? Have you planted a garden? What have you planted? Things like this. My son, he gets kind of upset with us when we ask questions. Well, I'm not there. Okay, I don't know how his truck's running. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. And so the only way I can find out, if he doesn't just come right out and say it, the only way I can find out is ask questions. So Naomi immediately begins to ask her questions. And she said, "Where did you glean today?" "Well, this field up there with the big tree." "Well, how many big trees are there?" Or the field out there that's got that canyon in it that there's a stream running through it. Or it's over on this side of town, or it's quite a walk out there to it, or something. She said, "Where'd you glean today?" "Blessed be the man who took notice of you." And so far, Ruth has not told Naomi whose field it was, or that she even talked to anybody. But Naomi says, "Blessed is the man." So whoever's field that took notice of you, may he be blessed because he's helping the poor. Blessed be the man who took notice of you. Bless that man. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "Boaz? Why, he's a relative." "Really?" Well, isn't it just like God to lead the person? He led Ruth to this field. She might have been in town for a couple of days, but she had no idea who this Boaz was. She had no idea where his field was. All she knew was the laws of the land, and the laws of the land said she could go glean wheat, glean barley. And so we find out that she knows who Boaz is, and we'll stop there with verse 19, and we'll pick up with verse 20.